We have just about everything that we need to display a user's followers and following, but we need to make a few modifications to our user repository and user service, because these two pages are going to list more than just the followers and the following. They're going to also contain the amount of ribbits that the logged in user has, as well as the amount of followers and the amount of following. So they are going to be more complete user profile pages. So let's first start with our iUser repository interface. And we're going to use the same concept that we did with this all method, in that we have a Boolean value which allows us to include other pieces of information. And we are going to apply this concept to our getBy methods. You will have a Boolean value for every extra piece of information: the profile, the ribbits, the followers, and the following. But all of these are optional, so we can continue to use the getBy methods as we have before to retrieve the basic information of a user, but then we can also specify other pieces of information to retrieve. Now, since we are using Entity Framework, these pieces of information can be lazily loaded, but we want to avoid that as much as possible. Let's open up the user repository and make the necessary changes to these methods. Let's start with the first overload, so let's just add those parameters, and then I'm going to paste in the code that builds the query. We first start with the DB set as queryable, and then we add the different pieces of information based upon the include parameters. So if include ribbits is true, then we will include the ribbits information. And then after we've built our query, we want to return query.single or default, and we want to select the user with the given ID. Now we are going to use this same code to build the query in our other getById method. So it makes sense to extract this into its own method so that we can save a little bit of time and coding. So select that code, right click, and go to refactor. Then there is this option to extract method. So click on that, and let's call this new method build user query. Then that will take that code and place it into a new method, and it will build that method for us. And now we can copy the code from our first getById method and paste it into the other getById method. But of course we need to query based upon the username. And we also need to add the include parameters to this second overload. So let's just copy those and paste them in. That's all that we need for our user repository changes. So let's close those files and let's go to our user service. Let's first open up the interface, and we could do the same thing with these getBy methods. But let's go for a higher level of API. Let's create some new methods that just include all of those by default. So let's return the user, and let's call these methods getAll4. And then we have the ID, and then one for the username. And then let's implement those methods. So open up the concrete user service class, and I'm going to paste this code in. They are very simple. They simply call the getBy method on the user repository, but they also pass in the include parameters. Now I chose to use the named parameter syntax in this case. We could omit this and just pass ID and then true, 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 and true. But this way it's a little more clear as what we are retrieving. We are including the profile, the ribbits, the followers, and the following. As I'm reading this code, I know exactly what's going on. We're now done with the user service, so let's close these files. And now we need to address the view. So let's go back to our layout download. I think the file that we want is the buddies file. So let me fire up Notepad and let's look at that file. Starting on line 28, we have the user profile. It is in the left panel, but then we also have something else within the left panel. We have the buddies. This is the followers or the following. So our view essentially needs two things. It needs the user and then the buddies. And the buddies are part of that user object. But we need something a little bit more generic because we want to use the same view for both the followers and the following. So the easiest way to do this is to write a view model where the two properties are the user and then an IEnumerable of user for the buddies. So let's go to our view model folder and let's add that class. And we will call this buddies view model. The first property is going to be the user object, and we'll just call this user. Let's add the using statement for our models namespace. And then we want an IEnumerable of user for our buddies. And with this view model written, we can go to our home controller and write the code for the followers and the following action methods. The first thing we want to do is check if the user is logged in, and if they are not, then we will redirect them to the index. Then we want to get the user, but we're not going to use the security class's getCurrentUser method. Instead, we are going to use our users service and the new getAll4 method. But then we will use security.userid to retrieve the user. Then we will return the view, which we can call this buddies. And then for the model, we will create a new buddies view model object. We will set the user as the user, and then buddies are going to be user.followers in this case. And of course, for the following method, we will use the following instead of the followers. So let's paste that code in and then change followers to followings. Before we create the view, let's build this so that we will have that new buddies view model class available in our dropdown. So now let's add view. Let's call this buddies. This is a strongly typed view, and we want the buddies view model. This is not a partial view, so let's just add it. And let's grab the markup from the buddies HTML file. We want this entire div element, and we are going to copy and just paste it into the view. We're not going to use that left panel section because we actually have two div elements with the class of panel and left. If we used that left panel section, then we would only have one of these div elements. Let's change the H1 text to just ribbit profile. And we've done some of this stuff already with our profile partial. So let's go to our views, shared, and let's open up the profile partial. Although that's not in shared, I guess that's in home. Yes, user profile partial. Although I think we are going to need this into shared, so let's just drag that down into shared. Let's grab the first bit of this markup, and let's paste that into our buddies view. So right after the div element, we want to replace the image and the span element. And we will need to change some of this code so that it is model.user.profile. We want to change that for the link as well. And I think we used that inside of the route values we did for the username. And we also want to change it down here where we use the username again. And now we have our counts. We have the ribbits, the followers, and the following. So we can use at model.user.ribbits.count. For the followers, we will use at model.user.followers.count. And then the following at model.user.following.count. Then we want to display the bio. So let's get rid of this placeholder text, and we will use at model.user.profile.bio. And then we want to list our buddies. So let's go back to our buddies.html, and let's just grab this div element and then the h1 element, your ribbit buddies. Let's paste that in, and then let's close that div element. Let's change the h1 text to just ribbit buddies. And then we want to display our buddies. Now we can use our user profile partial to display our buddies. So let's use a for each loop, var buddy in model.buddies, and we'll use the HTML partial method. We want to pass underscore user profile partial as the first argument and then buddy as the second. So now let's run the application and let's see if this works. After you log in, go to the followers page. We can see that there are no followers and one person that's following. So let's look at following, and we can see that this user is following John Doe. And we can choose to unfollow John Doe if we want to, so we can unfollow, and now the page is updated. Well, let's follow someone right quick. Let's go and follow John Doe once again. Let's log out, and let's log on as John Doe. Let's go to the followers, and we can see that we are following John Doe. And we have the choice to follow them if we want to, so let's go ahead and follow. Our counts are updated. If we go to following, then we will see that our following is working. Now the next step is implementing the user profile. So whenever you click on a username, it should display the user profile. And we will tackle that in the next lesson.